today. So every day we start fresh because we can't affect the past, but we damn sure can make a difference today.
Sorry for the wait on the new episode of Shop Talk. We're recapping 7:15 today, and we had some things that we had to attend to in real life, it just does its thing. But another true crime documentary is in the books for The Rookie. It was packed with some Chenford truth serum too, along with, more Liam Glasser. We had some cop mom interviews, and then kind of, we saw the return of Abigail too. So we do have some news to cover first, and then we'll get into the recap. Do you want to take us through the next episode description?
Yeah, so we have 717 called Mutiny and the Bounty. And the description is that the team helps Skip Tracer Randy when his new love interest is kidnapped. Meanwhile, Angela and Nyla enlist their moms to help catch a con artist, and Wesley is threatened to drop a case. So that'll air May 6th.
Hmm.
So a couple weeks from now, or
Yeah, and I think
a
we
week
have
from
the
now.
date.
Sorry.
What?
I was like a little over a week from now. I don't know why I said
Yeah.
a couple weeks.
Yeah.
Um,
We do have the date or the tentative date for the finale, which is May 13th. So it's like two
yeah,
weeks from Tuesday, which is crazy to think that we're
right.
already at this time. But
Yeah. Well, and apparently it's called The Good, the Bad, and the Oscar, which like alludes to Oscar coming back for the finale
yeah,
episode. So everyone's kind of talking about that.
yeah, yeah. And then Deadline also reported that Derek has been upped to a season regular for season 8. So that's exciting.
Yay.
I love that for us and him. I mean, I've really loved seeing his character in the show, and kind of growing too. So it'll be exciting to see where they take him
Mhm.
because I mean, will he stay with Tim as his TO or will he go to, have Nolan as his TO or something? Like it just depends on
Yeah.
if I guess if Tim becomes like if Tim goes over to Metro again or something. So,
Yeah. I'm still just thinking of the promo for next week's episode and how Nolan
mhm.
was like, I'm your nightmare TO. And I'm sitting there thinking, no, you are not. Like, he's just the least
Same.
intimidating person.
Yeah.
But, like, obviously, Tim couldn't just directly be Seth's new TO because it's like obvious conflict there.
Right.
But just I mean, like, if anyone's gonna be intimidating, it's gonna be like Tim or
Yeah.
Gray or I mean, just not Nolan,
Yeah.
though. Like,
Yeah. When
I'd
Nolan,
argue, like, Nyla's even more
yeah.
intimidating.
Yeah. When Nolan said that, I was like,
So,
okay, sure. Go with
yeah,
that. You're not intimidating at all. Actually, you're the farthest from that. So please
yeah,
just sit down. But yeah, I was like, I'm sorry, I can't take you seriously when you're saying that. So,
yeah. I mean, he's gotten better at being like an authority figure, being authoritative, but
mhm.
intimidating. Just, to have that, you know, like threatening air about him is
Yeah.
not something that I associate him with. So I just thought
Yeah.
that was kind of funny or ironic, I guess.
I would almost argue that Lucy was more intimidating than Nolan. And even then, like she wasn't super intimidating. Like I was like,
Yeah.
Nolan, just sit down. You're okay. Just sit down.
Mhm.
You know.
Yeah.
So there were a couple of Screen Rant articles too. Do you want to take the first one?
Yeah, I know you saved this for me because it was like about, reuniting a fan favorite Feds ship.
Yeah.
Brunson, who I talk about constantly when I'm not talking about the rookie. Uh, and basically, Alexi had said that the timing would have to be right, and both actors, obviously Kevin and Britt, would have to be available for them to incorporate, Brendan and Laura back like together for a plot line. But Alexi did say down the road for sure he'd, like to see them together again. So I'm putting that stamp of approval and running with it.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, give it to us, please. I know that Kevin's had some other stuff in the works too, so like
yeah.
that's great for him. I would love to see that for him, but I'm also like, please come back to the rookie, please.
Yeah.
And bring Britt back with you. Just
Yeah.
for one episode. That's it. That's all I
Yeah.
need.
I mean, it's been great that we got them individually. And then like we
Yeah.
had Antoinette too,
Yeah.
Davika's character with Kevin, for the couple episodes that he was back
Yeah.
earlier this season. But I was just like, I miss their partnership. It just like makes me want to rewatch Feds again, and like it's not on Hulu anymore, like for
It's
free. So
not?
that's like a bummer. Yeah. I don't know where it went, but it went off
That's a
the
shame.
available streaming. So I'm like, I mean, I like it, but I don't feel like paying
Yeah.
for it.
Yeah.
So
That's a
yeah.
shame.
But
Yeah, so then another Screen Rant article was so Alexi did all the press for this week, and so he had said in the article about like the loose end for season 7, he said that he's already thinking of a way to further expand the Glasser plot in season 8. He'd like to create a dynamic and dramatic storyline if Glasser goes free. But basically it's not gonna be wrapped up in season 7. So he's gonna be one of the new rotating villains.
I mean, listen, I'm not mad at it because, like I've said in previous things, I don't know if it's here, or just like online, but just like because I've seen Seth Gable do creepy in other shows very, very
Yeah.
well. So like I'm not mad at it, honestly.
Yeah.
But I just hope like Nyla was doing so well with not having work overwhelm her personal life, and now
Yeah.
it's like getting back to that a little bit, and I want her to be balanced out again though, so I don't know
Yeah.
if I like that too much if it
Yeah.
would fall back on her, but
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like at some point it'll come back and be like all about Nolan at that point. Like, about
Yeah,
how he like
probably.
took him down or something. So,
Probably.
and then there was another Screen Rant article. It was a whole like different one. And Alexi talked about the Abigail and Henry relationship, saying he felt that it had run its course. And then what the ending means um for the episode as a whole. Like, could there be demons in the rookie? And he said, I love that we have characters like Selena and in some ways Lopez who believe in good and evil. And then he also talked about Chenford and the truth serum and said that Lucy, or it was asked like Lucy has already admitted that she's forgiven Tim. When does that scene take place episodically? And he said it's not in real time, but there's a scene. I think it's a few episodes before where she told him in the car that she hadn't fully forgiven him yet. So I think it's between those two moments where she really subconsciously made her peace finally with forgiving him. And Alexi also said what I loved about that moment was that it was a revelation to her as well because of the truth serum. She discovers that she actually has forgiven him for everything, which I think was really a moment we've been building to our words. I feel like we still should have seen it before the truth serum. But like I get it. Like it was maybe she thought like she had kind of told him or she was gonna tell him and that just kind of triggered it. But I was like, why couldn't we have seen it? But also the rookie timeline makes absolutely no sense. So like
Yeah.
I'm just like leaving it there, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And then Alexi also talked about the sergeant's exam, and if it's what determines the future of the Chenford relationship. And he said, I think that's a part of it for sure. There is an obstacle that's it. I think there's an obstacle that's very real and needs to be addressed. And I think that in theory, down the road, there could be some trepidation or fear about what if it's not like how it was before. It's not quite as easy as pass the exam and bam, we're back together again. So it's definitely going to be like another stepping stone for them. Um, yeah. So, and then there was a TV Insider article as well, with Alexi, and they asked, does the truth serum take them one step closer to getting back together as in Chenford? And he said throughout the season, that's where they've been heading. It's a fun detail, and the moment of her realizing that she's now fully forgiven him, which is sort of the most important moment that happens there. And then he just kind of hinted at what's next for Chenford and says a lot of it does focus on the sergeant's exam because in a lot of ways it's sort of the final obstacle to wherever this is going. So I guess we shall see. But we know the promo for Tuesday's episode because we're recording this on like Sunday. So we don't really see any Tim and Lucy like preparing for anything in there. It's just all about Seth. So
Yeah.
should be interesting. But like Lucy's obviously rattled by it, like just because why is he back there and how did he get to be back there and everything? So, yeah. But we'll go ahead and start with the episode. So we kind of just lumped Abigail's disappearance and the Westview case into one because these true crime documentaries are like hard to break apart and outline. So we start off with the Nolan interview and he throws it back to Henry and Abigail and how he first met Abigail and talks about her like faking everything, thinking that it was a funny joke and like it wasn't. And we find out that she broke off the engagement, which is sad.
I know lots of people were like upset about it. I mean, like me too, though, honestly.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, it just, yeah, because I'm just kind of still bummed out that we didn't get like, I mean, yes, we got Henry mention or, whatever, but it's like not the same as like having him there or like
Yeah.
having a reaction. Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
It was, yeah. But anyway,
So I don't remember if at the for the Balin wedding if they mentioned that Henry and Abigail were still together, but like were they
I don't think
divorced
so.
then or broken up then?
Well, I don't know because like if she went missing like 6 months ago, that would have been, well, I guess it would have been like the year. Oh God.
Yeah, because the rookie
Uh,
timeline's all weird.
okay, so it's like what, like a year, like so a year before she supposedly went missing was like the Balin wedding,
Yeah.
right? So no, because all they talked about was like Henry's flight or something, and him having
Hmm.
problems like getting there. And then he got there and it was just like, okay, it's just Henry, no Abigail, but like he didn't say anything about it, I don't think.
Yeah.
Like no one ever mentioned it.
Yeah. So I'm
Well,
kind
I
of
mean,
like,
we mentioned it, but no
yeah.
one on the show, I mean.
Yeah. So I'm kind of like, were
Um,
they apart then? Like, who knows? But just a little minor detail that I was fixated on. So, yeah, so like Carrie said, 6 months ago she went missing, and John says to the interviewer, who is Alexi, and I don't think he like had a name, so I'm just calling him Alexi in all of this
yeah,
because like,
same.
why not? And John's like, you're gonna have a very open mind, and I'm like, Okay, why?" But so Chenford's interviewed then next, and when Alexi's like, "It's always great to see my favorite couple," Tim and Alexi just have a stare down.
Yeah. People were like memeing that when that was the like quick sneak peek
Yeah,
or whatever. People memed that
yeah.
so much and it was so funny.
And Lucy says that they did find Abigail's film equipment, and she's making a movie. It's called Hell PD. So then we have Smitty being interviewed, and we should have really had more of him in this true crime documentary. I feel like he should just be in all of them. He kind of has been, but not that much.
Yeah.
Um, so he's getting interviewed and says he only saw a little bit of a cut of Abigail's movie and it could have used more gore. And Alexi's like, I didn't ask what you thought about the movie, but I wanted to know why you thought Abigail's case was so compelling. And Smitty and him just like go back and forth. And I'm just like, everything about Smitty is just hysterical.
That's so funny.
Hysterical. So the more they investigated, the more it became clear that Abigail had a lot of people angry with her. And so Alexi's talking to Cliff Wright, who's the president of Claremont Pictures, who says that Abigail sent in a compelling pitch video. And it was a low budget film, which was fine, but she pitched them a straightforward horror flick and then kept changing directions, reshoots piled up, and they had to pull the plug on the project. So she had to find new producers and turn to crowdfunding. And Nolan passed along Abigail's pitch video to Angela, who's always loved scary movies. And she's interviewed and she's like, what's the point of having a husband with a trust fund if you can't support the arts? Again, she is a whole mood. She's a
Right.
whole mood. So then Raj is interviewed because, of course, there was an article about like how he's more of an annoying character than Bailey Noon. And I was
Oh,
like,
right, with that
fair.
headline or something. And I was like, oh
Yeah.
my God.
I was
I
like,
can't believe
fair.
they did that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, and so Raj was then interviewed because he was hired to compose music for a film. And he's like, it was very complicated to work with her, but I try not to take it personally. Like she kept throwing out the music I was writing. And then when she completely disappeared, I thought she ghosted me, but turns out she ghosted everyone. And she's like, I wish I got paid though. And Selena pops out from the corner after hearing that. And she's like, wait, you didn't get paid? Like,
Right.
I was like, okay, yeah, I mean, that's important, but also, like, we're talking about a missing woman here. Like,
Right.
can we get back to the topic? So it's discovered that Abigail made several trips up to Pelican Bay to visit serial killer Liam Glasser. So Nyla's recapping the Glasser case. We see Glasser holding his hands up in cuffs, saying he's an innocent man. And Alexi reminds him that he's been charged with murdering 10 people. And he calls them horrific allegations, and the case was harassment. But he says that those allegations have not been proven in a court of law, and they never will be. So Glasser gets up, he's annoyed, and he's like, if I'm just gonna be railroaded like the police here, then I have nothing left to say. But before Glasser leaves, Alexi wants him to talk about Abigail and why she went to see Glasser. And he's like, it was to learn about Westview. So we go back over to Nolan and how Glasser is tied to Westview. And it turns out that Abigail asked about the abandoned morgue, but Glasser couldn't help her out much because he had never been there himself. And so then he told her what he heard and that the place is haunted, which is obviously crazy. And so the LAPD couldn't figure out how Abigail found out about Glasser's connection to the psych ward in the first place, because it wasn't shared with the press, and the LAPD kept those details away deliberately. So Angela says that making movies is boring. It's worse than surveillance. And so Angela was talking to Abigail, and they were talking about her recent casework, and she's like, "It's possible I may have mentioned something about the psych ward." I'm like, okay. I mean, I get it that like she knows Abigail well or semi well, but also like, aren't you not supposed to talk about like your casework as a cop? But sure,
Mm,
sure. So, from Abigail's notes, it was discovered that she abandoned her movie for a new project after meeting with Glasser, and she was creating a true crime documentary about Westview. So the footage on Abigail's camera is brought up and asked if it was shared with the public, but the LAPD and FBI finished processing the scene. The hospital put up a razor wire fence and hired a security guard for 24-hour surveillance prep to keep intruders out. But it clearly didn't work, so they sent a patrol unit to check in with the guard. So as Nolan and Selena are walking up to talk with the guard, he runs because I mean, he sees police and so he's got a rod. So at first he claims like he did nothing wrong, never met Abigail, but then they searched his office and it was clear he was lying. They found like a whole bulletin board full of pictures of her, and Abigail had become his obsession. So things don't look good for Carl Dittweiler, and they think she might have rejected his advances and things went sideways. So John's holding out hopes that Abigail might still be alive, but he's like, I've been on the job long enough to know that that might not be true. So turns out that Abigail first initiated contact between them because she was researching the abandoned psych ward, and Carl was the nighttime security guard. So she wanted access on the down low, and reached out, flirted, and I loved how John like couldn't even say it, and Selena's like, "It's okay, you can say it." She flirted. I was like, I get it that it's
right.
awkward for him because Abigail was with Henry, but like it's not anything bad. I was just like, why
Right.
are you awkward like this?
Yeah.
You know? So Carl agreed to let her in, and then Harpaz interviews Ditweiler, and she's like, yeah, I showed her around, told her some stories of things that went on there back in the day. And he was asked to help her with her documentary, and she'd give him a credit on the film. And so he says he ran because he knows what it looks like. He was the last person to see her before she disappeared. So Harper and Lopez wonder how he knows that, and he's like, I watched the darkness swallow her up. So he says he knows one of the orderlies who told him things, and Abigail wonders if, he can introduce her to him. Because we kind of go back to, the clips on Abigail and Detweiler. And so, she's like, I won't tell him that, I've been let in here. And, she was like, I would never, like, we're friends. And she's trying to get on his good side. So she hears something like some noise, and he tells her he has to go back to the main building and radio security let him know that he's at his post. And she's like, okay, I'm gonna go check out the noise. Dude, you should have went with her. Like, I think at that point, going with her is more important than radioing security and letting them know where you're at. So Harper and Lopez weren't sure of what to make of the sound that Abigail claimed she heard, and Carl was never heard it. So it's possible that she's faking to juice up her documentary. And Alexi says that they've analyzed some of the audio files from Carl's video and plays it for Harper and Lopez. And they hear some demonic sounds, and Harper wonders if that's even a frequency that humans can hear.
Yeah.
But whatever she did or didn't hear, she kept searching, meaning Abigail. And so we see Abigail searching with Carl, following behind her, and that's the last we see of her. So they could just rule Carl out as a suspect. They only had circumstantial evidence against him, and as they went through the footage of her laptop, they discovered that Carl wasn't her only extreme research tactic. So we see her filming in her car, showing a hidden camera on her jacket, and Abigail had Carl lure the director of Westview away from her office so she could sneak inside and look at the files. She pulls out the file on Rachel Hall, and so then Chenford is asked about Rachel in their interview and their history with her. And it's so awkward. And then we see Rachel being interviewed, and it's revealed that she worked in the psych ward at Westview while getting her degree, and it was challenging. And I'm like, okay, this is like what, the third time that Rachel's come back and like had something to do with the rest of the storyline.
Yeah.
So she says that the patients would arrive at the facility with a diagnosis of mild depression, and a week later they'd start to exhibit disordered thinking, and eventually they might become violent. And it would get worse, not better, and conventional treatments never seem to work. So when asked about the demons at Westview, Angela gets nervous, or Rachel gets nervous and tries to play it off, but Selena begs to differ. And when John looks at her, she's like, well, is there another explanation for everything that's happened? We have Liam Glasser, Harrison Novak, Charlotte Russell, and Ava Mitchell. And Alexi confirms that Charlotte and Ava were never at Westview. So what's the connection? But it turns out that Charlotte's nanny was a patient there when she was older, or when she was a teenager. So we then see the nanny, and she confirms that she was a patient, saying she had been having thoughts of self-harm, acting out, and she's talking about how the treatment didn't help at first, but then she's accepted it and things started to get better. So Alexi also brings up the Russell family, and she's like, I'm honored to feel like I had a small hand in Charlotte's upbringing. And so Chenford is talking about the stabbing that took place between Charlotte, Ava, and their friend Grace. And Lucy says that Charlotte's actions are her own, not inspired by some nanny with a history of mental illness or some demon in a computer that convinced Charlotte to do it. And then Zuzu is brought up, and Nolan confirms that Zuzu is not a demon, it's an AI. And so Charlotte fed Zuzu information about herself and her friends, and based on that, Zuzu told Charlotte what it thought she wanted to hear. So Alexi brings up Zuzu, also helping John with the watch. And, Alexi also spoke to Zuzu, or tries to, about Westview. And it turns out that Zuzu told John that Abigail was in room 666, the number of the beast. And so John confirms that the facility doesn't have that room number and Zuzu isn't a demon. So they were at a complete dead end and running out of time. But then Abigail has also been gone for 11 days at this point. So something's got to give. So the odds were getting slim of finding her alive, and they were running out of options until a 911 call came in about suspicious noises and lights coming from this abandoned wing. So Chenford goes to check it out, and Carrie will get into that later because it's a whole thing with them. Um, but John and Selena got involved when they were about to clock out, and they got the call that they had to go help. So there's a funny moment when John and Selena are walking like through the halls, and he's like, "Yeah, loose cipher," and Selena's like, "Lucifer," and she's like, "You're messing with me, aren't you?" And John's like, "Totally," and they just keep going. Like, That was just a cute little funny moment just to kind of like break up the tension, in the
Right.
whole documentary. So John and Selena run into these ghost hunters who are filming an episode of Ghost Files. Turns out Selena loves that show. She's all into it. So Alexi talks to them and, they try to ask Alexi some questions, but Alexi's like, no, I'll ask the questions. Thank you very much. And so they're still filming their YouTube show. So it's like two or three documentaries all going in one, all going on
Right.
in one episode. And so they play their findings for John and Selena, and she hears something asking them to show them where they were at. And John's like, so we're just gonna give up on Tim and Lucy. And we cut over to Chenford sitting in a room waiting for Nolan and Selena. And again, you'll talk about that. Um, so John and Selena are walking through the halls of Westview with the ghost hunters, and they keep hearing "Help me." And Selena's like, "Okay, that's someone asking for help. Like you can't deny that." And John's still skeptical, saying it's one of the guy's crew members or it's something pre-recorded. But they keep hearing like different things from the "Help me" voice. And so they come across the door that was covered up with wall. And they end up finding Abigail. She rushes to hug John, saying she'd been trapped in there for so long, she thought she was gonna die. And John's like, how did you get down here? And she's like, I was exploring, following this weird, beautiful noise when all of a sudden it got cold, so cold, and I could feel something come after me. And, I was scared, so I hid behind a cabinet, but the floor was wet and rusted, and then it collapsed, and I couldn't find my way back out. Um, and John's like, you fell from the ceiling. Are you okay? And I'm like, honestly, I have the same questions.
Right.
So Selena mentions that she's been missing for 2 weeks and wonders how she survived. And Abigail is in awe and hugs her. And she's like, I had a bunch of trail mix in my bag. Plus, I found an ancient water jug in one of the cabinets. And Bob had power bars. And then we see a decomposed Bob. And Abigail's like, if it wasn't for Bob, I would have lost my mind. At this point, she's clearly drugged. Like, clearly. And so Abigail was safe despite what she had been through, but the state of her mental health did still pose some questions. So we see her talking to Selena, who she says at first, like, she was angry that her and Bob were stuck down there and he wasn't making conversation. But then she just realized that Bob was shy. So Selena asked if she believed that Abigail had a demonic encounter. And Selena says she went in perfectly sane and came out friends with the corpse. Like, that's how possession works. You can't rule out demons. And I just love how, like, every time Selena was, like, on a course of it's possessed, it's demons, like, whatever, other people were coming in and they were like, no, it's not. It's not. I'm like, let's believe what Selena has to say for a minute here. Like, please, please. Because Nyla follows that up with the yes, you can rule out demons. And so we see Selena finding something and showing Nolan. And it's section 6, lab 6, door 6. And door 6 is written in blood. Just like Zuzu had said. And John's like, that's just a weird coincidence. That's what he's telling himself anyway. So Abigail's in the hospital, and John and Selena are there, and the doctor says that they found a cocktail of drugs in her system. And Abigail's like, I don't do drugs though. And the doctor says that they're talking about a bunch of like powerful hallucinogens. And Abigail's like, I'm not hallucinating though, and to ask Bob. And the doctor says that they found a similar cocktail in Chen and Bradford. So, like the one and only time that we see Gray in this entire episode, he's just like, yeah, thank goodness that the drugs weren't fat soluble. Otherwise Chen and Bradford would have been forced into medical retirement. And then he also says that's not what killed Bob though. He was shot 6 times in the chest. So like Gray literally just comes in for that little snippet. So Lopez is finally interviewed together and they have an ID on Bob. His name was Bob Medina, and a friend reported him missing about 6 months ago. He was a private investigator, and at first they couldn't find a connection to the hospital for him. So Alexi proposes that there's a third killer now, and that there has to be something that the facility does to draw people towards homicide. And Wesley says that's a stretch and a half, recapping the suspect's motives, saying that whoever killed Bob saw an abandoned building, thought it was a perfect place to dump a body. And Angela looks at him and she's like, or there was some dark history and drew evil to it. So they start kind of arguing in their Lopez way. And she's like, well, if it's all so explainable, then you spend the night. And, I dare you. And he's like, I pass on that. And she's like, you're scared. And he doubles down on that. And so John is then interviewed, and Abigail comes in asking Alexi what he's doing. And John's like, yeah, I said I would talk to Abigail for her documentary. And Alexi is puzzled by that. And she's like, it's my story. Who better to tell it? And John's like, well, I can still sit down with you, Abigail, but and she tells him that it has to be an exclusive. He can't do both. And Alexi doubles down with that too. So John ultimately chooses to talk with Abigail. And so Abigail tells John that, they will talk about what else she found in the lab, some paperwork, evidence of a secret government program. And we see a clip of Abigail's documentary where she realized she uncovered more than just something more haunting than any ghost or serial killer. And she uncovered a conspiracy that went to the very highest levels of the government. So Selena talks about the government files that Abigail found detailed classified plans and methods for human experimentation. Selena talks more about MK Ultra, goes into that. And Alexi mentions that there was no evidence that the CIA ever used Westview as a base of operations. So why were MK Ultra documents there? So Harper and Lopez started digging into the trove of files. One name kept popping up. Dr. Julius Erickson. He was one of the psychologists contacted by the CIA to conduct the experimental research. But then he took a new job and ran the hospital for 20 years. And from the notes that they uncovered, it seemed clear that he continued his own research in private. So he was using those drugs on Westview patients at first and then started using them on himself, believing he had found a cure to improving his own mind. But spoiler alert, he didn't. And in the last moment of lucidity, he decided to destroy his research, dumping the chemicals outside the building where they slowly started to seep into the structure. And some of the drugs were potent, enough to be absorbed simply by touch. Hence Chenford and, all the truth serum. So Erickson then committed himself to Westview shortly after and never said another word. And so we see a clip of Abigail talking to her camera, and she says that all of this has put herself in danger. Um, but the best way to protect yourself is with the truth, which brings us to Carolyn McGrath. And Carolyn is the one who hired Bob to go to Westview and just, as Abigail is saying, what she needs to find out why she's hit in the head and falls to the ground. Luckily, though, a neighbor filmed Abigail's abduction and the car was able to be tracked to Westview. And we see Selena and John find Abigail and Carl in a room. He was the abductor, being pressured by his boss into killing Abigail. His boss, obviously, is the Westview director. Um, and Alexi wonders why she would try to kill Abigail, and it was ultimately to cover up Bob's murder. And so Abigail talks to Carolyn McGrath, who hired Bob to look more into her friend Winona's treatment. And we kind of go off onto another tangent there. But Bob didn't think, she was being paranoid. And so then Rachel's interviewed again, mentions that, kind of walks through Winona's treatment plan and everything that she had. And, Carolyn was suspicious because Winona was always different, but wasn't crazy until Westview made her lose her mind. This was the break, though, that the LAPD needed when they started looking into it. And a significant number of Westview patients were wealthy, and a high percentage were ordered into conservatorships. So Wesley talks to Abigail about the conservatorship and how it's hard for adults to get it because of the potential abuse of power. Mary Wallace is talked to again. She was supposed to inherit money from her family, but, after her break with reality, she was cut off. Her brother got everything. And so with a search warrant, though, they found the gun used to kill Bob in Director Davidson's closet. She'd been running her scam for a decade, and she was actually Dr. Erickson's therapist in the last years of his life. So he probably told her about his experiments, and in exploring his lab, she uncovered tainted water and realized its potential. So, the state like ordered a full investigation into every conservatorship that Westview ordered, and hopefully the victims will get their rights and assets back. Um, and so Westview has been closed though for good, so that's good. But then we see Abigail interviewing Glasser, and he's like, "I'm glad that this is getting so much attention. You know, I think it'll do my defense good. It'll give them a fresh coat of paint." And he's like, if the jury won't listen to a reason because I'm innocent, then perhaps they'll listen to the story of a simple tradesman who fell victim to a poisoned environment. Glasser does confess that he went into the abandoned ward when he was a kid, and his father's warnings didn't scare him away. He was just more desperate to see. And he's like, whatever lurked inside must have infected me. So Wesley then hears about this, and he's like, no, we have him dead to rights. Like, he's not. This defense is not even going to work. Raj is back then, and playing drums in John's house. I swear to God, Raj just gets into everyone's house, like
Right.
unasked. It's just he's just there.
Well, because he
Um,
started at Lucy's apartment, right, when he was first
yeah.
interviewed, and it's like, why are you there? And now it's like, oh, okay, drums. Why is he at John's house? Like,
Hmm.
I mean, John's face though was so understandable. Like he was
Yeah.
so frustrated. It was
Yeah.
funny.
Yeah. Raj apparently claimed that he needed good acoustics, but it's getting shut down. I'm like, what did he need good acoustics for? And why is Abigail there? Like, what is going on?
Guess we got
Um,
back on the movie.
Yeah. And so Abigail and John talk, and she says she's fine. She's happy to have something to focus on. And he's like, if you ever need someone to talk, and she's like, I have a good therapist who, has no connection to Westview. And John asks her how she knew about Bob, the PI, was working for Carolyn McGrath. And she said that Bob told her while they were stuck in the lab, and he was chatty once he opened up. So then at the end of the episode, the ghost hunters are back at Westview. Their job isn't finished because the hospital has housed killers, evil experiments, and perhaps the supernatural. But their job as investigators is to collect and present questions and possibilities and interpretations solely belonging to their viewers. Um, and then they have some weird moment and wonder if they should check it out, but they run out instead. And I don't know, towards the end, I was like, where are we going with this? But I guess that's the open-ended question about
Right.
if there's demons in the rookie, so in the
Yeah.
rookie universe. But yeah, that's about it for the true crime documentary part of it. Do you want to take us through the Chenford and Truth Serum stuff?
Oh, sure. So for that part, that was Tim and Lucy had went to check out the abandoned wing where the 911 call was coming from, and they were looking around, and Tim had asked, when the last time it had rained was, and he and Lucy both ended up touching the walls because they were wet, and it didn't really make sense as to why yet, anyhow, at the time. Um, and just the fact that John and Selena were dispatched there to help find them and then get so sidetracked. And John literally vocalizes, so we're just gonna forget about
Hmm.
Tim and Lucy then. And I was like, that's a fair question. Because
Yeah,
they're just literally walking off with these ghost file guys. It was so funny. I was like, okay, sure.
yeah.
Um, because then cut over to Lucy and Tim, and Lucy's asking Tim how long they've been in the room, in the one part of the ward, and he doesn't know exactly. Not that she minds because she feels good, and then she's like, "Oh, I wonder if we've been drugged." And um, they it's then that they realize they both touched the wet walls, and Tim, says that he hates making mistakes in front of Lucy, and she's surprised by this because he's never, admitted that to her before. And that's when they, you know, realize, oh, it's a true serum, sodium pentothal, which is what they suspect that it was. And Tim, on one hand, thinks that they should keep quiet. Lucy disagrees and, wants to keep talking in true Lucy fashion. And then she asked him what his most embarrassing memory was. And he apparently in third grade had snuck his hamster into his classroom in his pants. And I was like, all right,
Yeah,
so random.
yeah.
Um, yeah. And then we get the fast forwarded. Um, Maleric improv scene because Alexi had said that when he was answering the questions on Instagram
Okay.
about the episode that the scene just called for a fast forwarded scene and they didn't have anything specifically written for it, and so like the braid, and like them looking in the mirror and like touching the cobwebs and things like all that stuff was, I guess, just them
Oh,
doing whatever the heck they wanted to do for you know
I
five
didn't
seconds
know
of
that.
time, or well, when the time lapsed, obviously it's probably a few minutes worth of stuff,
Yeah.
but um yeah. So you know leave it to Melissa and Eric to improvise some of our some of the most random but yet most fun Chenford
Yeah.
things. So that was fun. um and I don't know, I just love that we got to see Lucy's hair down in
Yes.
uniform for once. I was like, yay. I don't know, I just am a sucker for things like that. Like I
Yeah.
like seeing people in different things. It's been like so long since we've seen anyone like with their hair down in like uniform, unless you count Angela and Nyla, but they're detectives now, so they don't really have uniforms
Yeah.
and they can just kind of, do whatever they want. Um, but anyway, so we then get the scene of Tim telling Lucy, that with the kind of father that he had, you internalize it. If you fail, you deserve to be punished. And without his dad to punish him, Tim punished himself by breaking up with Lucy. Um, and Lucy told him that, he didn't just punish himself, though, alluding to the fact that she was also punished by that decision because she obviously didn't want him to break up with her.
Yeah.
Um, and he understood that, if she, could never forgive him, and then she kind of interjects and is, told him that she had already, fully forgiven him, and she kind of stopped for a second and kind of wondered aloud when that happened. Um, and so that was kind of the moment that, Jennifer had talked about way earlier in the news where Alexi had said, sometime between that moment and the earlier moment of Lucy in the car with Tim from a few episodes back, saying that, she was on her way to forgiving him,
Yeah.
she made that leap somewhere in there. Um, so, um, and then it, the clip stops, like we're seeing this through each of their body cam footage, and then it stops, and then you're cut back to the present time. And Lucy says that they just can't use that footage in the documentary because people say all sorts of things when they're drugged. And Lexi asked if they didn't, if that meant that they didn't mean what they said, and what about the baby names that they discussed. But we don't get to hear any baby name discussion because then Chenford ends the interview there. And I just thought it was funny that Tim was like, why do we keep agreeing to do this? And Lucy's like,
Yeah.
I don't know. Wait, excuse me. Like she was ready to go, like still trying to be polite about it though. Meanwhile, Tim was just like ripping everything off and like was so
Yeah.
done with it. It was so funny.
Yeah.
So
I
yeah.
just love that, like, yeah, that like that. I mean, they're like, why do we keep agreeing to this? And it's just like, not only do they bring in like some random like actor or whatever to be like the interviewer for this, but they have Alexi, no less. So like it just has to kind of be like a weird kind of like situation or like meta or something to like be talking to him about the show or like just about storylines that have been written. Like it's just so funny, like it has to
Yeah.
be wild. So
Yeah. Or I think Madeline had said, Abigail, like she had posted, I think, on her Instagram somewhere, it was like, Alexi's the only person I can say suck it to, and like it's okay
yeah.
in the episode. So I was like, all right, that's funny.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, that had to have been wild for everyone to do those things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
So
that's about it for this episode though. I mean it was a fine episode. It wasn't my favorite true crime,
no, it was not mine
documentary,
either.
but
I wanted it to be though. I mean, goodness, the likes on the promo when we posted it were wild. So
yeah.
I was like expecting it to be some major thing. I mean, I'm glad Abigail's okay, don't get me wrong, but I seriously thought they were headed in that, doomsday direction.
Yeah.
So,
But I think Tuesday's episode is gonna make up for it because it's gonna be
mhm.
crazy. Like we have
Yeah,
Seth coming back, we have Wesley like getting taken down possibly by an influencer. Tim and Lucy help, or Tim helps Lucy with the sergeant's exam. Like I think it's gonna be a good episode. So like this one was
yeah,
just a fine one to like take us into next week. So
mhm, yeah.
we do have some listener thoughts. So we'll go through those. Melanie said, I didn't enjoy this episode. I thought it was the worst of the documentary episodes. Seemed like they had a good thing going on in the first half and then decided to include the stuff from the sanitarium randomly. I couldn't follow it and wondered how Tim and Lucy got to the truth serum, and also what happened to Henry. Like there was just no mention of him. Um, and then talking about the promo for Tuesday, Seth returns, which isn't a surprise, but wait, I'm waiting to see how it will be received. The preview shows that only one person even talks to him, and that's no one. Nothing that you can say to me at this point will be believed. I want to see Gray's reaction, definitely, because Gray had to have signed off on it, right? That like Seth was going to come back. So yeah, it's gonna be interesting. I mean, in the preview, we see literally everyone turning their backs on Seth. Like, and it looks like even Tamara's there at the station too. So it's gonna be really interesting to see how Seth is received. Also to see how Miles and Seth interact.
Right.
Because, I mean, they were starting in this together. So
Yeah.
yeah, so and then Melanie also said random thought, but why didn't they just send Seth to another precinct? It'll be interesting to see the dynamics as Nolan almost washed out himself. I
That's a
feel
good
like it's
point,
just
though.
what?
Like, why didn't they just send him? They had they mentioned the North Hollywood
Yeah.
one at different times. There's other, and just why he's so hell bent on getting back to the same place that did him wrong. It's like,
Mhm.
I feel like he's got to be out for revenge as opposed to proving himself. Like, I feel like
Oh
they're just
yeah.
misleading us with that
Yeah. I
scripting.
mean, I feel like it just has to work, like for the storyline anyway, but yeah, like he's got to be out for
Yeah.
revenge. Also, the way that he comes into the locker room, he has a smug face on, like I'm back, like, and I'm here to ruin all of your
Yeah.
lives. Like, yeah,
Yeah.
it's gonna be really interesting. Well, and then like I was watching the promo again, and when they're in the warehouse, it looks like he's already gotten into a fight or something because he's like
Mhm.
got like cuts around his eye. So I'm like, okay, what are we doing here with him? So. And then Melanie also said episode 17 brings in a new character, Nyla's mom. Wonder who they will get to play her. Please let it be Gina Torres. I would love to see it be Gina Torres. Um, I don't know though. Like, I don't know if I see her Nyla like or like whoever her character would be and Nyla like being related, but I could see it being
Mhm.
Gina Torres.
Yeah.
Um, and then Emily left a comment and said, why didn't I mention that they'd broken off at the start of the documentary in terms of Chenford? Instead, they just went along with it and kept looking at each other. Yeah, that's a good point. Like when Alexi said, it's always good to see my favorite couple, I feel like they could have been like, yeah, well, we actually broke up.
So
But
true.
I don't know, maybe not. So,
Yeah. Who knows?
yeah.
I have
Um,
no idea.
That's about it for us this week. So, I mean, you'll hear from us two times this week, honestly, because
Right.
we'll be back on Thursday with a new episode. But yeah, so you can find us on Twitter at the Shop Talk Pod underscore or email us at shoptalktherookiepodcast@gmail.com with all of your thoughts. You can find us individually on Twitter as well. I'm at jstark804.
And I'm at Carrie Hyman.
And we're on TikTok at the Shop Talk Podcast underscore. Be sure to check out our merch at shop-talk.dasher.com. We have some new designs. They're on sale. I mentioned, or, we have the jersey designs. We've got a couple of other, kind of squad goal designs and everything like that. So, if you love the podcast, please leave us a rating and review. It helps others find us, and we would really appreciate it. So we'll be back on Thursday with a recap of 716 and breaking down Seth's return. Bye, everyone.
Bye, guys.
Go get him, boo.